Today's presentation, in a certain way, builds on yesterday. It's independent, but it also builds, and I'll just therefore give a minute recap of what we talked about. Yesterday, the focus was on the people, the Jewish people, and how the Palestinian Authority frames Jews as the evil force in the whole world, and therefore it is righteous, it's just, it's defending humanity to fight and kill Jews. And you heard numerous examples of, 8 times just in the last year, calling for extermination of Jews, count them one by one, kill them one by one, don't leave even one. So that was all about how the Palestinian Authority, we called it virtuous violence, convinces their people that Israel, that the Jews are such a detriment to the world that it's virtuous. It's virtuous to fight them, and that's how they turned good people into terrorist supporters. The Palestinian Authority, like every society, has fringe, but we see in the polls, it's virtually unanimous. It's over in the 90% of the people who support violence. And how that happened, it was because they packaged fighting Jews as virtuous. Okay. Today we're going over, and you'll see a little bit later why they're connected, to the land issue. The Palestinian Authority tells certainly Canadian leaders and European leaders, American leaders, that all they want is West Bank, Gaza Strip, what they call West Bank, Gaza Strip, Jerusalem. They base this on the argument that all of the history in the land is theirs and that Israel has no history. And I want to show you, as I did yesterday, I want to show you all of this in their own words, their own narrative, how they literally look at history, see the word Jewish history, cross out the word Jewish, and put in the word Palestinian. Now, the first principle, as I say, Israel has no history in the land that they call Palestine. And I'm going to start here with Mahmoud al-Abbas. You saw him last night. He's Mahmoud Abbas's advisor on Islam. He's head of the Sharia courts. He's the most important religious figure. And listen to how he talks about the history in the land.
نعم نحن نريد أن نحمي الرواية الحقيقية والتاريخ الحقيقي لفلسطين. هناك مخاطر لتزييف الوعي الإنساني تجاه فلسطين من خلال تزييف التاريخ ومن خلال إقحام جملة من الأساطير والافتراءات والاختلاقات المزورة في ثنايا هذا التاريخ، الاختلاقات التي تدعي زورا وبهتانا وجود ما يسمى بمملكة إسرائيل القديمة.
The inventions of the falsely claimed ancient kingdom of Israel. He says there was no ancient kingdom of Israel. There was no history in the land. This is just one example. I'll give you another one here. And this is important. Palestinian Authority defines the beginning of Israel and the Jewish people as the Balfour Declaration. And that's why they call us a colonial implant, because before then, and I'll just read this to you from their official newspaper, the Balfour Declaration is the summary of a large and dangerous colonialist project through which a people, the Jewish people, was invented and did not exist until then in history. Rather, they were simply Jews of different races and nations. In the framework of complicated act of fabrication, the project included establishing a national homeland for the Jewish people, that was just invented. So the idea here is very clear. The Jews are a religion, saying religion not connected to any land, no history in the land, and this was a fabrication to create a people, the Jewish people, as if they had never existed before. PATV often has little short items like this to keep reminding their people that Jewish history there is no history in the land. And I'll just show you, this was one of them that appeared a number of times talking about the legends of the Western Wall.
كشف مقطع فيديو نشره الإعلام العبري عن حجم الحفريات الإسرائيلية في باطن المدينة المقدسة التي يخطط الاحتلال لضمها إلى ما يسمى مسار أنفاق الحائط الغربي بهدف تعريف السياح على رواياتهم المزعومة.
هذه صور من حفريات إسرائيلية التي لم يثبت فيها أي وجود أثري لمعبدهم المزعوم. هذا الفيديو الدعائي يهدف إلى استقطاب السياح وتلقينهم الرواية الإسرائيلية التي لا أساس لها على الواقع إلا في رؤوسهم المحشوة بالأساطير والأوهام. ما تسمى سلطة الآثار الإسرائيلية كشفت أن هذا المبنى الذي ألفوا له قصة واخترعوا له رواية تتناسب وافتراءاتهم سيضم إلى مسار أنفاق الحائط الغربي تشهد حربا ضروسا تحت الأرض وفوقها لتهويد بقعة لن تنطق إلا بلسانها الفلسطيني.
Okay, so you see the extent. They even take Israeli films and then they present them as just fictitious and lies. Now, sometimes they also talk about the essence of the Jewish people. And here, for example, political commentator, 90% of the Jews are Ashkenazi, whose genetic origin is the Khazars, again, not connected to the Bible stories. Even though genetics proves the opposite today, 10% are Berbers and Arabs. The genetic Jews, sons of Jacob, became Palestinians. So he's saying the biblical story existed, but they became the Palestinians. The Palestinians of today are the descendants of Jacob. That's what he's saying here today, whereas the Jewish story has no historical trace and no archaeological evidence. And of course, I'll show you some of that later, Now, I'll just give you one more example here. This is a religious figure, the land. The adults among us know the Jews did not establish a stone, a plot of land, a structure, and they brought all the archaeologists here to prove that the land is theirs, but they didn't succeed. Again, this is their claim constantly, that we brought archaeologists to try to create a history, but that we never succeeded. Now, what they do, as I said before, they take out, since they've taken out the word Jewish, they have to fill in the gap. Who was here all of those years? And this is what they do. They turn it into a Palestinian history. And I'll give you a few examples of this. This is the prime minister at the time when he was speaking, Mohammed Shtaya, and this is what he talks about. This is how you'll see how he literally erases the world Jewish or Israeli history.
ومشروعنا لتحرير الأرض والإنسان ونحن متجذرون هنا هزمنا الهكسوس والرومان واليونان والفرس والتتار والفراعنة وكل الغزاة الذين عبروا على فلسطين هزمناهم وباسم الشهداء سوف نهزم هذا الاحتلال البغيض الذي سوف يخرج من أرضنا.
And this is very important. The creation of this fictitious Palestinian history and the denial of Jewish history is what they're saying gives them the justification to get the occupiers out. We're an occupation because we had no history here, because we're an artificial creation. And their whole argument for expelling us from the land and erasing Israel is that they have this history in the land. Sometimes they create incredible stories. For example, here is senior academic. He used to be the head of Al-Quds, the president of Al-Quds University, and he talks here about the Canaanite Arab ancestors fought against all the invaders, and that's what he's saying. Again, the same message, they fought against everyone. Those were defeated left and moved to the trash can of history, and foremost among them the Hebrews. The Hebrews were here, they went to the trash can of history. Why? Because Goliath is none other than the Palestinian king and hero who fought the Hebrews. So here they're taking a little bit of biblical history and they're turning it upside down on his head, and Goliath supposedly defeated the Jews, and now, of course, he's turned into a Palestinian instead of a Philistine who came from the Greek area, and certainly not a Palestinian who came from Arabia. So this is part of the incredible, and this is just one example of their rewriting the story. So they'll take a little grain of something, they'll take a name from the Bible, and they'll turn it into. Now, once Jewish history is erased, so the Judean, probably one of the most famous Judeans, maybe the most famous of history, Jesus then becomes a Palestinian, and I'll give you a few examples of this, and you'll see how it keeps building into more and more traditions. This is Mahmoud Abbas himself. We celebrate the birth of Jesus, a Palestinian messenger of love, justice, and peace. This is Mahmoud Abbas, of course, head of the PA. Here we have the Grand Mufti of Palestine.
فلسطين والقدس أيضا فيها ولد المسيح عليه السلام. سيدنا المسيح عليه السلام هو فلسطيني بامتياز، ابن فلسطين.
Okay, now, of course, he wasn't born in Palestine. Palestine was the name that the Romans gave to Judea after the revolt. And as part of their trying to erase the Jewish connection to the land, they call it Palestina. But when that we're talking about now, we're talking about the year, the Bar Kokhba rebellion, we're talking about the year 130 of the Common Era. And Jesus, of course, couldn't have been in Palestine at the time. He was born in Judea. In fact, of course, you know, when the Romans defeated and destroyed the temple, they minted a coin which has the words on it, Judea Capta. So it certainly was never called Palestine in the time of Jesus, but this is part of their rewriting of history. And from the religious leader, I go to a political leader. This is one of the top political leaders of the PA, Abbas Zaki.
اللي بيع نفسه إلى الحركة الصهيونية هو يعرف إنه عيسى ابن مريم فلسطيني.
Here he's talking about a lot of people in this room, Christians who accept that the Zionist movement, what he calls narrative, he says those sold himself to the Zionist movement, they know deep in their hearts that Jesus was the son of Mary, is Palestinians. This is what he's claiming, that actually people know this, even though they support Zionism, they know that it's not true. Now, just to show you more examples how widespread, Tifak Tirawi, senior Palestinian leader, the first Palestinian and the first Shahid, the first Islamic martyr. Now that's very significant. Tomorrow I'll be having, actually later this evening, a whole session on Islamic martyrdom, how the Palestinian Authority uses this concept. The martyr, according to Palestinian tradition, you'll see later, has lots of rewards, marries 72 virgins in Palestine, and they're saying that Jesus, incredibly insulting, he was the first Islamic martyr. That's what they're saying. Another Palestinian leader, we're proud of Jesus being a Palestinian. The Palestinian Jesus, son of Mary, Palestinian Jesus, son of Mary, was a victim. All of this is a constant messaging to try to give their people a history. This is a people that was created really in 1965 with the creation of the PLO. There had never been a Palestinian nation, never an archaeological anything. No one claimed that there was anything Palestinian. So they're desperately trying to create a history. So they talk about having been here forever and then attach themselves to Jesus as part of this attempt. Now, they go even further. They not only turn Jesus into a Palestinian, they turn Jesus into a Muslim. And here we're talking about the Mufti again. He says, we're talking about an ongoing chain of prophets of Islam from Adam to Muhammad, the ongoing chain representing the call for monotheism and the mission of Islam. The prophets were all the same religion. Jesus was born in this land. He lived in the land, in Bethlehem, also Nazareth, moved to Jerusalem, so he is a Palestinian par excellence. We respect Jesus, believe in him just as we believe in the Prophet Muhammad. He was an Islamic prophet. This is their message. By the way, this message is not an original Palestinian message. It's a message in the Quran, where the Quran teaches in the chapter, I think it's Surah 5, where it says that Muhammad came to the Jews and he wanted them to accept him. He said, I'm not coming to make a new religion. I'm just coming to correct your mistakes. Jewish mistakes, meaning that Moses, Abraham, all of them, as you hear here, were Islamic prophets, and that Judaism was distorted, therefore I'm coming to correct. And the Jews rejected him. And then he comes to the Christians in the same chapter. I'm coming to you not to create a new religion, but to correct your mistakes. And of course, they rejected him as well. And that is where this comes from. So when he says that Jesus was a Muslim, he's actually basing this on Islamic tradition in the Quran, that Muhammad claims, or the tradition claims, that there never was another monotheism. It was always Islam. The Jews distorted it, and then later on, and then Jesus preached Islam, and then the Christians distorted Jesus' Islam, and then Muhammad came to correct the mistakes. So this is what the Palestinian Authority is saying here from the top religious figure. Now, once Jesus becomes a Palestinian, then all Palestinians become Jesus. And I'll just show you this in a couple of graphics. These are cartoons, all that appeared in the official Palestinian paper. It says here on the crucifix up here, it says Palestine, and we see it's American weapons and Israeli weapons and all these horrific-looking people here celebrating the blood of the Palestine Jesus. And here's another example of the same message. This map, the colors of the Palestinian flag being crucified. And here, this was a particularly horrific one because it says here the name Samir Arbid. Who was he? He was convicted of murdering a 17-year-old Israeli girl And when he was arrested, they decided to turn him into a victim again, and with the portrayal here of Jesus. So it's literally the Palestinians have. Once Jesus became a Palestinian, the Palestinians also then therefore become Jesus. Now, because Jesus is Palestinian, so then Christmas becomes a Palestinian holiday. And here you'll see how this keeps building one after the other to create a false reality and to give themselves roots. This is the Fatah official Facebook page. Christmas is a Palestinian holiday. There's a special significance to the Christmas celebration in Palestine since it clearly has become a national holiday. So it's not a Christian holiday for them. It's a Palestinian holiday. Now, because Christmas is a Palestinian holiday, then Santa becomes a Palestinian. And you see how this keeps progressing. And here is Santa is at the checkpoint. Israeli soldiers are aiming at him. And then the next day they put this one where they killed the Santa at the checkpoints. And then here they're examining him. They're checking and going to steal his presents that he was coming to give out. And here they've tied up his hands. He wanted to go. You see the sign says Jerusalem and Bethlehem. They've tied up his hands with a Star of David, and they're not letting him go. Not letting him go to Jerusalem or Bethlehem. Here he wanted to come down and give presents, and all of these are different cartoons in the official media of the Palestinian Authority or Fatah. And instead of the presents, the Israeli soldier is dropping hand grenades down and shooting. So this is Jesus, and here again, he wants to reach a child, but the child's on the other side of the road. All of this is the Palestinian Jesus, and they even have a different message. Yesterday we talked about the glorification of the violence. So here, Santa is throwing stones at an Israeli soldier. So he's now not just a victim, he's the opposite. He's the hero. He's fighting the Israeli soldiers. So again, Santa has also become a Palestinian, and here's the V for victory. So all the different messages are coming across. Now, here we come to the most interesting and I would say almost evil part of this. Yesterday we talked about the Jews being the evil force in the world. Well, the Palestinians had to explain to their people why Israel exists. If Jews have no history and no roots and everything is false, why did Jews who were comfortable in Europe and why did Jews who were comfortable in the United States, why did they come to this land and literally drain the swamps when they came and deal with everything and deal with wars? Why did they come? Why didn't they just stay there? So their answer is, the Jews didn't invent Zionism. Zionism was invented by the non-Jewish world to get rid of the Jews because they were busy killing them for centuries and they got tired of killing them. And so they said, you know what, let's steal Palestine and dump our Jews there. You'll see, we'll call it a dumping ground for human waste. You'll see in a moment. But this is the message. And I'll show you here a couple of significant people talking about this. This is the head of the Palestinian Writers Union. Listen to hear how he explains what the Jews were doing and how the Jewish evil in the world is what created the state of Israel.
هؤلاء اليهود منذ أن وصلوا إلى بريطانيا في القرن الثامن عشر بداية القرن العشرين هؤلاء أصبحوا يشكلون مشكلا إلى بريطانيا خاصة أن اليهود أينما حلوا يحاولون السيطرة على اقتصاد البلد وعلى المال. فعندما قاموا الصهاينة في بريطانيا بذلك بدأ التذمر والشكوى من المواطنين ومن الاقتصاديين ومن السياسيين أن هؤلاء اليهود يحاولون السيطرة على بريطانيا وليس فقط قاموا بهذا العمل في بريطانيا في معظم الدول الأوروبية.
نعم، كان يحل الخراب أينما حلوا.
لذلك بريطانيا فكرت كيف تتخلص من اليهود.
Wherever they arrived, destruction followed. So this is the message. You saw it yesterday, but here I'm adding this final point. Destruction followed. So yesterday's message, therefore they were killed. Today's message was they finally decided to stop killing them and to create Zionism. Zionism wasn't a Jewish idea. Zionism was a European Christian idea in order to get rid of the Jews. Here's this is a little mini documentary that they put together that was repeated many, many times on Palestinian TV, explaining what you just heard in pictures as well. And it starts with all the periods of expulsion, or some of the periods, to show that everybody hates the Jews. Yesterday we talked about anti-Semitism being self-defense. Here you're going to see it said explicitly.
أمام مؤامرات اليهود طاقت أوروبا بوصفهم وأوصافهم واحتكارهم وفسادهم وتسلطهم وتسلقهم لأعمدة السلطة وأساسات الدولة. في العام 90 و200 وألف أصدر الملك إدوارد الأول قرارا بطرد اليهود، وتبعته فرنسا وألمانيا والنمسا وهولندا وتشيكوسلوفاكيا وإسبانيا وإيطاليا، وأحست الشعوب الأوروبية بأنها نكبت بإيواء اليهود. اليهود مرة أخرى ينتزعون وعد بلفور وأوروبا ترى فيه حلا أمثلا للتخلص منهم.
As an ideal solution. This is Palestinian ideology, and it's probably the most important part of Palestinian ideology, because in one moment they deny Israel's right to exist. That's why they call us a colonial implant. We would never have come. We are a colonial implant. This is the Palestinian Authority, and therefore even our religious sites are taken. And so for here, they show a picture of the Western Wall, and the narrator says, it served the Jews as a place of worship only after the cursed Balfour Declaration of 1917. Again, everything started, even the holiness of the land, everything started with Balfour. Now, like you saw yesterday, everything comes from the top. Here's Mahmoud Abbas talking about the evil of the creation or the illegitimacy of Israel, and listen to what he says.
إن بريطانيا والولايات المتحدة قررتا إقامة وزرع كيان آخر في وطننا التاريخي، وذلك لأهداف استعمارية. والحقيقة أن هذه الدول الغربية كانت تريد أن تتخلص من اليهود وأن تستفيد منهم في فلسطين، تضرب عصفورين بحجر.
Okay, two birds with one stone. They wanted to have a colonial implant, and they wanted to get rid of the Jews. Okay, let's send the Jews there. They'll be the colonial implant, and then we'll have two birds with one stone. Explicit statement by Mahmoud Abbas, fits very, very well with the entire ideology. Now, this one was an incredible one. This was October 24th. It was 2023. A few weeks after the October 7th massacre. And there were a lot of world leaders who were visiting Israel. Now, Palestinians had to explain to their people, well, if everybody hates the Jews, why are these world leaders coming to support Israel? And here is the explanation. They didn't want reverse migration of human waste. Listen to this on official PA TV.
وإنما هم كأوروبا وأمريكا استطاعوا التخلص من اليهود الذين هم أنفسهم يعتبرونهم نفايات بشرية، وألقوا بهم في فلسطين. أوجدوا لهم مكان بعيدا عنهم، بعيدا عن أوروبا. لا يريدون الآن هجرة معاكسة وعودة هؤلاء إلى أوروبا مرة أخرى. قالها بايدن إذا تذكر خلال الأحداث في إسرائيل، لو لم تكن إسرائيل موجودة لأوجدناها، لأوجدها لكي تستوعب هؤلاء النفايات البشرية.
They don't want reverse migration. So when the nations of the world are sympathetic to Israel, it's because they don't want reverse, because the Jews are human waste that they succeeded in dumping. This is incredible, but you see how deep this ideology is of the world suffering from the Jews. Now, because of all these reasons, and the Palestinian Authority does this many, many times, they rejected the partition plan of 1947. The UN in 1947 voted the British were going to leave, the British mandate would end, and Palestine, what was then British Palestine, not Arab Palestine, both Jews and Arabs in Palestine were called Palestinians, and you can see it in the British documents. The Palestinian people, the Arab people at the time, decided to reject partition. And I'll just show you two things that come together in a children's educational magazine. One of them is they talk to the children, they teach the children. This is Fatah magazine, about how old the Palestinians are. And they say they showed interest in raising bees in the ancient period 10,000 years ago. Then another place they say there were 5,000 years ago these Palestinian residents settled in. Thousands of years of Palestinians living in Palestine. So they've been here thousands of years, and then they go into this. Why did they reject it? Palestine has belonged to Palestinians for thousands of years. Therefore, the Palestinian people rejected this 1947 UN partition resolution that gives rights to our land and our homeland to foreigners who came from all ends of the earth, foreigners who did not know Palestine, did not live in it, neither them nor their fathers and forefathers. They do not even have one color or one ethnic origin. They are a strange and odd mixture of different races. Again, this message, but this is very interesting. The entire conflict that we've been having since then is because they rejected partition. Had they accepted partition, there would have been a very, very large Palestinian Arab state. There would have been a very tiny Jewish state. But instead they came and they attacked Israel. We know this. But here they're not even denying that they attacked Israel. They're not even denying that they were responsible for the War of Independence. We rejected this resolution, and we then started the war. Now, this also led to one of the most complicated problems. It shouldn't have been so complicated, but it led to the issue of the refugees. Now, we know that, according to UN numbers, 750,000 Arabs. By the way, they didn't call them Palestinians in all the UN resolutions because there was no Palestinian identity yet, a Palestinian Arab identity. They called them Arabs from Palestine. The Arabs from Palestine, it talks about 750,000 who ended up in refugee camps. And there's a big debate amongst Israelis and amongst Palestinian supporters. How did this problem arise? And it continues until today. And that's why I'm going to play you something now. And I say, listen to the refugees. The Palestinian Authority around Israel Independence Day every year, they have interviews with many, many people who are in refugee camps. For years they've been doing this. And they tell how they became refugees. And what's fascinating about these stories is they constantly are reaffirming Israel's statements about how they became refugees. And that's what I'm going to play this, including from no one less than Mahmoud Abbas himself. Now, I want to play this for you. It's a little bit longer than most of the things, but it's so important that you hear this because this is still so central today. And, of course, the Palestinians talk about the Nakba and they say, oh, Israel expelled all these 750,000. There were some cases that Israel moved some population. Most of them, as you'll hear in a moment, left on their own. And I'll play this for you now and get an important message.
اطلعوا على الأردن. هذا الخوف سيطر على الناس
بالعصابات الصهيونية.
ماذا؟ أسبوعين؟ هذا كثير جدا.
ساعتين زمان لبينما نحرر.
هذه كذب.
اللي طلعنا اللي أطلعنا الجيش الأردني على إنه بدأ يصير معارك وإحنا بدنا نروح تحت الرجلين. قالوا لنا بتطلعوا لكم ساعتين زمان لبينما نحررها وبعدين بترجعوا. طلعنا بأواعينا ما أخذناش شيء لأنه بدنا نرجع بعد ساعتين ليش نحمل؟ فبنستنظر في الساعتين لحد الآن إحنا.
اعتادت إذاعات الأنظمة العربية القول لنا ابتعدوا عن الجبهة. إنها مسألة 10 أيام أو أسبوعين على الأكثر وسنعيدكم إلى عنكاره. واعتدنا القول هذه فترة طويلة جدا. ماذا؟ أسبوعين؟ هذا كثير جدا. هكذا اعتقدنا والآن طوينا 50 عاما.
جيش الإنقاذ انسحب من المدينة فأدى إلى أن الناس بدأت ترحل. سبب بالذات مثل الخليل كانت بتخاف من أن ينتقم اليهود في ذلك الوقت من مذبحة 29. فهذا الخوف سيطر على الناس مما أدى إلى أن يخرج الناس بشكل عشوائي من البلد.
I'll stop it for a second here. This is incredible. This is Mahmoud Abbas. He was in Safed as a child. And he said that when the Arab Liberation Army was losing nearby and the Jewish army was coming close, no one even told them to leave. But they remembered that in 1929, there had been massacres in Hebron and Safed. The Jewish communities were massacred there. And here we're talking about 20 years later, 1948. They were afraid that the Jews would take revenge, so they left on their own. And this is Mahmoud Abbas saying the Arabs of Safed ran away on their own. And it caused them to leave, he says, in a disorderly way.
في كل شيء مؤلم وكانوا هذول في 48 هم يدافعوا عن نفسهم وفي الآخر قالوا لهم اطلعوا على الأردن كلها كم من أسبوع وبترجعوا.
كانت الميكروفونات تجوب الشوارع بالسيارات تطالب الناس بالهجرة لسلامة العمليات الحربية. نودي علينا بأصوات عربية لمغادرة المنازل لأننا نحن الفلسطينيين المقاتلون نريد أن نقوم بعمليات حربية ولا نريدكم أن تعطلونا فنرجوكم الهجرة فورا نرجوكم مغادرة المدينة فورا جميعنا أنا وعائلتي وغيرنا من الناس توجهوا بأي طريقة، كل واحد بطريقته. توجهنا إلى الميناء وأخذنا باخرة.
وقالوا لنا اليهود هجموا على منطقتنا والأفضل إخلاء البلد والعودة إليها بعد انتهاء المعركة. وبالفعل كان منا من ترك النار تحت طنجرة الطبيخ، ومنا من ترك أغنامه، ومنا من ترك أمواله وذهبه على أساس أن نعود بعد ساعات.
إنه ذكر لي جدي وأبي عند النكبة أصدرت فتوى من قائم مقام عندنا بأنه من بقي في أرض فلسطين وفي أرض المجدل فهو خائن،
وذلك من أفتى لهم بحرمة البقاء في تلك المواقع يتحمل إثم هذه الفتوى في الدنيا والآخرة في التاريخ وأمام الله يوم القيامة.
بتذكر في واحد كان ضابط إسرائيلي اسمه مونجو.
أيوة.
كان من كبوت عين مفرطس. كان في علاقة مع جماعة من المنشيين، خاصة مع المختار. فقال له للمختار، قال له قل لي ما حدش يهج، ما حدش يروح. اما شو صار يقولوا؟ المختار خاين، المختار بيعها، المختار بيعها والناس صارت تهج.
هذيك الوقت قالوا انه والله يا ابو اسبوع اسبوعين وبترجعوا لفلسطين، وفي الجيوش العربيه دخلت لفلسطين، وفي جيش اسمه كان جيش الانقاذ. طلعنا احنا واللي لجأوا لعنا كلنا، طلعنا الى لبنان.
وكان في عنا بصراحه رعب. قرر من عائلتي، يعني كنت اكبر واحد من اللي بيرحلوا مع زوجة اخي واولاد اخي اثنين، انه يرحلونا. كان عندي ولا مؤاخذه كندرتين، واحده جديده وواحده عتيقه. قلت خلينا نطلع بالعتيقه لانه جديده خليها لنرجع. طلعنا على امل انه نرجع. اخذونا الى الشرق، شرق صفد، الى نهر الاردن.
رحلت أسرته في البداية مع أسر أخرى بعد أن اشتدت وطأة إرهاب العصابات الصهيونية، وذلك بدافع الحرص على الحياة ولاعتقادهم بأن غيبتهم عن بيوتهم لن تطول أكثر من أسبوعين، ثم سيعودون إليها بعد دخول الجيوش العربية إلى فلسطين.
وجاء جيش الإنقاذ العربي ليقول للفلسطينيين: جئناكم لنقضي على الصهاينة ودولتهم، فاتركوا بيوتكم وقراكم ولسوف تعودون إليها بعد أيام آمنين. وعدتنا القيادات والنخب في بداية النكبة عام 1948 بأن زمن اللجوء والشتات لن يطول، وأن الأمر لن يتعدى أياما أو أشهرا قليلة، ثم يعود اللاجئون إلى بيوتهم التي ما خرج منها أكثرهم إلا تصديقا لتلك المواعيد العرقوبية التي بذلتها لهم القيادات والنخب السياسية. أنتم لازلتم تبحثون عن آلية لإيصال الدعم كالباحث عن إبرة في كومة قش أو كجيوش أسلافكم عام 48 لتدفعنا للهجرة بزعم إخلاء ميادين القتال من المدنيين.
I'm going to stop here. It goes on. And one of the reasons I showed you is that there were people from the north, from the south, from Ashkelon, from Jordan, from Haifa. The one who was from Akko, by the way, who said that they gave us the choice to stay, he actually stayed, and the interview was actually happening in Akko, in the north. So what we have here is 15 examples of people from all the different regions of the land who all explain. The Jordanian army told them to leave with microphones. The Palestinian Liberation Forces, the newspapers, everyone was telling them to leave, except who was telling them to stay were the Israeli neighbors. In two of the examples here, it was the Israelis tried to convince them, you don't have to go, just put down your weapons and you'll live in peace. And those Arabs who stayed and lived in peace, today, they and their children are Supreme Court judges, they're members of the Knesset, they're heads of hospitals, heads of banks, those Arabs who chose to stay. And the ones who didn't, they left. And that is where the refugee problem came about. And it's a shame and it's unfortunate because the Palestinians actually know this. They don't publicize it a lot. You'll never hear Abbas. Well, we did hear Abbas saying it. But for the most part, they talk about the expulsion. But the fact is, Palestinians, certainly the older ones, and they've passed on this message that people actually know what happened. And it's incredible because this is such a rallying cry of the enemies of Israel, the Nakba, the Nakba, the Nakba. Well, listen to the Arabs. Their own leaders caused this. Okay, so that is something very critical that I wanted you to hear about. Now, because of this whole history, and denial of Israel's rights. By the way, if anyone wants to, you can see that entire video with all the different examples on our website. Just look up the word leave and you'll get to you'll find that video on our website. Now, because of this, it's not, when they talk about the occupation, they tell Canadian leaders that they mean West Bank, Gaza. I want to show you what they tell their own people. This is a little documentary that was on many times on Palestinian TV.
يمتد الساحل الفلسطيني من جبل الكرمل شمالا إلى رفح على الحدود المصرية جنوبا، ويقع بين المرتفعات الجبلية الفلسطينية شرقا والبحر الأبيض المتوسط غربا. فيه العديد من الموانئ مثل ميناء حيفا وعكا ويافا وأسدود وعسقلان وغزة.
Of course, these are all Israeli ports that they're presenting as Palestine. This is official Palestinian TV.
قد توافدت عليه مختلفة عبر العصور طمعاً للاستفادة من موقعه، وما زال الساحل الفلسطيني تحت الاحتلال الإسرائيلي منذ عام 48.
Palestinian coast is under occupation since 1948. Israel's creation is an occupation. This is so important, again, because the Palestinians come to the world and say, oh, just end the occupation, there'll be peace. To their own people, they tell what they mean by that. They mean all of Israel. And that's why in the graphics, this is Palestine in literally thousands of maps a year that we see. This is from a Palestinian school book. And it's called, this is a geographical area of the state of Palestine. That's how it's defined in a school book. This is from a children's magazine, and they have it in English, From the River to the Sea, Palestine will be free. This is a Fatah PA message. This is a Ministry of Education website. Palestine, the land is ours from the river to the sea. There's no issue of compromise. And then children are making these cartoons, these drawings all the time, and they're being published in official Palestinian places. That is the message. Now, maybe the Palestinian narrative is true. Maybe, as we heard Mahmoud Abbas, there was no kingdom of Israel. We have all these records in the Bible. Is there other evidence? Well, there are hundreds of examples of evidence, and I'm going to give you a few here, just specific ones that absolutely corroborate the Jewish history here. And I'm sure many of you know these, but it's important to be reminded. So, for example, these are all inscriptions and things I'm showing you that are coming from non-biblical sources. So a 9th century king of Assyria was named Shalmaneser III, and this is something that they found there in the area. It's called the Kirk Monolith, and it describes in their language the victory at the Battle of Karkur in the year 6 of his reign. We're talking 853 BCE. And one of the things he writes there is that he fought and defeated 10,000 soldiers of King Achav the Israelite. And exactly corroborates what is said. He actually, in the biblical story, it doesn't have the number 10,000. We don't know if he might have been exaggerating, but in any case, he talks about Achab, the Israelite, as it appears in the Book of Kings. Here's another one from Shalmaneser, another statue, the Kobaya statue, and it talks about in the 18th year of his reign, he received tribute from Israel's king Yehu, also appears in the Bible. Here, it's also fascinating. These are two bulla. Bulla were stamps that were used in the period of the Bible, and I guess not just the period of the Bible, but all around the ancient world to show that something was official. Now, in these two stamps with names were found 3 meters apart during in the excavations in the city of David. City of David is just, if you go and you see what's the old city walls now, just underneath that, the city of David is called. And these two coins had the name, here's the Hebrew, Gedaliahu ben Pashur and Yuchal ben Shmalyahu. Here's the English of these two, found 3 meters apart. The amazing thing about these two bulla is that these two names appear in the same verse in Jeremiah. They were advisors to King Tzidkiyahu, they were antagonists of Jeremiah, and he mentions them in this verse, and their stamps, advisors to the king, were found together. There were many other seals like this in bulla. So, for example, Baruch ben Neriah was the scribe who wrote down all of Jeremiah's words, and there have been several bulla with the words Baruch ben Neriah, the scribe, that are found in various places. And here's one of the most interesting ones. There was a lot of arguments. In other words, even after all of this had been found, there were many archaeologists even some Israeli archaeologists, who were questioning if there really was a House of David. In other words, they found later artifacts, House of David, they hadn't found, and then they found this one about 15 or 20 years ago. And what it says as follows is that this is the Tel Dan stele, and it talks about the death of two kings, Jehoram of Israel and Achaziah of Judea. They were fighting together against the Syrian king Hazael. And this is recorded in Kings 2, verse 9. And what does it say? It says the Syrian king, it's implicit here, killed Jehoram, son of Achav, king of Israel, because that was the northern tribe, king of Israel, and killed the son of Jehoram of the house of David. It literally says the word Bet David. Bet David is the Hebrew lettering, house of David, and that's a title, Beit David, that was found 26 times in the Bible, is that expression, Beit David. And here they found this on an inscription, so that if anyone was trying to question even going back to the house of David, we now have this absolute proof that that was a term that was used. The king of Israel was the king of Israel, and the king of Judea was also known as the house of David. And again, this is from an Assyrian stone. There were other bulla. I won't go into all the names here, but many bulla mentioning names of people in the Bible. Here we have Yerushalayim spelled out completely. They found for the first time. Most of the time in the Bible, it's without the yud. If you know the Hebrew, at the end, this one has it the full time, as it is in the Bible. And of course, we have the Arch of Titus, which is, of course, very. Anyone who wants to, you can't deny all this archaeological things I've shown you, and there are, like I say, hundreds of other examples like this. But the Arch of Titus in Rome, now all those other examples, by the way, were for First Temple examples, and that's what's so important. The Arch of Titus, of course, is Second Temple. The year 70, Titus defeated the Jews and Judea, actually, and destroyed the temple, and then they took, according to what it says in the Bible, as well as, not the Bible, but the historians, we see here on his arch, celebrating the victory over Judea, he literally put the picture of his officers and the slaves carrying the artifacts from the temple. And if you look at this, clearly there can be no doubt that's what's being talked about. And yet with all of this evidence, you heard just 3 of the examples. There is no history. They never had a history. They weren't a nation. That's their message. It's all contrived, false, fictitious, as you heard them say. One of probably my favorite example of their denial is this one from a children's book. Israel recently, or I guess a few years ago, they created a new shekel. And this is what the Israeli new shekel looks like. It has a 1 on this side and it has the lotus flower on this side. And it's based on the ancient shekel, which is this, that was used actually around the time of the Second Temple period, under the Persian period. So they asked the question, and Palestinians don't have their own currency. Palestinians' currency is the Israeli currency, and they call it a shekel. So they ask, and this is a children's magazine from Fatah, the shekel, is it Canaanite or Israeli? Today, we use the Israeli currency, the shekel, but is the shekel Israeli, and does it have a connection to the Jews? And then they answer, the shekel is a Palestinian currency and not an Israeli currency. They stole our currency. They stole our embroidering clothing. They stole our falafel and our hummus. And before that, they stole our land and our homeland. And then they go to this picture over here and they say, pay attention to the picture of the ancient Canaanite shekel. It has a picture of a lotus flower on it. You see? And the same picture appears on the new Israeli shekel. Thieves, aren't they? Now, the irony is that they put both sides of the shekel. And you know what it says over here? It says Yehud, which means Judea. So literally they proved Judea right here in the magazine. Of course, they didn't think to read what it says here in the ancient Hebrew script. Which is very similar to the modern Hebrew, actually. You can recognize it. But this is to the extent that they go. They take the same way all of Jewish history, and they cross out Jewish history, they put in Palestinian. They even do that with the coins here. This coin was a Palestinian or Canaanite coin. So that is everything that they do, completely denying the actual history. Now, the final thing here is, that because of this, Israel has no legitimacy, and therefore there will be no two-state solution. They come to some countries, they come here, they say, yes, we'll have a two-state solution. To their own people, they say there won't be. And this is most important. I showed you yesterday how important the religious leadership and the religious messages are. If you remember, 95% of Palestinians say religion is an important part of their lives, important to them. Well, the Mufti of the Palestinian Authority and said words that are identical to the Hamas Charter. Now, we know the Hamas Charter rejects Israel's right to exist under religious grounds. And this is what they write in the Hamas Charter. The land of Palestine is Islamic waqf until Judgment Day. It or any part of it should not be squandered, or part should not be given up. This is the Hamas Charter. It's Islamic waqf. It's prohibited to give anything to the Jews. Now look at the Mufti. This is what he said. Palestine, that includes within it Jerusalem, is waqf, the same exact land, holy Islamic land. It is forbidden by Sharia law to relinquish it, transfer ownership of it, because it is part of Islamic public property. Granting ownership of Islamic territory or part of it to the enemies is invalid and constitutes treason. It's not that Israel has no right to exist, which if it were political, you could say, okay, they could compromise and change their mind. No, it's prohibited under Islamic law. That's the message coming from this top Palestinian Authority official, the Mufti. It's prohibited under, we've heard it all also from Mahmoud al-Abbas, Abbas's advisor on Islam. So again, this takes it to a whole new level, You are violating Islam if you accept Israel's right to exist. That's the message. Now, Mahmoud Abbas, who we heard yesterday, again, this is Abbas's advisor, the most important religious figure, head of the Sharia courts. Yesterday, we heard them talking about the necessity to kill Jews. Here, he packages it differently. The necessity to kill anyone from the Quran who has taken your land or your honor. Listen to this.
إذن اقتلوهم عائدة على المعتدين ولا تعتدوا إن الله لا يحب المعتدين واقتلوهم المعتدين اقتلوهم لأنه لو أجا واحد يعتدي علي يعتدي على بيتي يعتدي على أرضي يعتدي على وطني يعتدي على مالي يعتدي على عرضي يعتدي على أهلي أنا مأمور إني أقاتله مأمور إني أواجهه مأمور إني أقاومه ومسموح لي إذا لزم الأمر أن أقتله كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وكما قالت هذه الآية واقتلوهم حيث ثقفتموهم ما داموا معتدين ما داموا محاربين ما داموا يستهدفون وجودكم ويستهدفون حقوقكم ويستهدفون أرواحكم مسموح لكم تقاتلوهم وتقتلوهم كمان.
Kill them wherever you find them. And he's now, of course, if you listen to all the reasons that are valid for killing, if someone takes your home, your land, your homeland, your property, your honor, your any of these things, these are all things that they're constantly accusing Israel of doing. You just heard it. It's not their land. Israel came, stole their homeland, etc. And he's saying the Quran is commanding you, and he repeats it, kill them, kill them, kill them wherever you find them. He's literally putting and that's why, just like we saw yesterday, that's why even if you're killing a man, woman, child, infant, baby, you're still fulfilling. You're still fulfilling. Then it was to get rid of the Jews. Now you're getting rid of people who are taking Islamic land. Two different components here. The Jews deserve to be killed everywhere, and the Israeli Jews in particular, because they've stolen land that is Islamic. That's the message coming through. The Mufti, so we just heard the Abbas's advisor on Islam, and the Mufti here, I won't play it, but he's asked all the religious rulings that were issued by the nation's religious scholars obligated fighting against the thieving Jews. That's the question he's asked, and he answers, the text clearly say, if an inch of Muslim land is stolen, jihad becomes a personal religious commandment for everyone who's capable. This is Sharia law. Again, fighting Israel is Islamic law. That's what he's saying. You have to. And again, this was what makes compromise so complicated or almost impossible. And this is why every time Israel offered almost or all, or even more than all of Judea and Samaria to the Palestinians, first to Arafat and twice to Mahmoud Abbas, they rejected it because they come to these negotiations saying that it's a political negotiations, but they all know that they also have this religious obligation. And they all know they've been telling their people all along that they're eliminating all of Israel. And that's why there has never been an agreement with the Palestinians, because of both this religious component and the other one. Here, I just thought this was ironic. We talked, about the fact that the Christian community has been decimated in the Palestinian areas since they took over. And here you have Abbas on TV, and he claims that the Christians and the Muslims are fighting again together against their mutual enemy, Israel. And this is one of the graphics that they show to talk about what the end game is. This is the Palestinian flag destroying the Israeli flag, Palestinian map. And here we have the Mufti again. Palestine will be liberated. The evil will pass. It will return to Islam. It will return to Islam, not return to Palestinians. It will return to Islam. That is the key message here that keeps coming from the Palestinians. Now, I'll just summarize history from a Palestinian children's book. Educational children's book, a children's magazine. And this is sort of everything that you've heard in one little nutshell here. The Canaanite Arabs settled the land of Palestine. They claiming they're Palestinians. Palestine underwent dozens of invasions. Babylonians, Persians, Sumerians, Assyrians, Hittites, Pharaohs, and the Hebrews. Hebrews are one of the invaders who they defeated. 100 years ago, the British invaded it. Palestine fell under Zionist occupation, which continues until today. Again, Israel's creation was Zionist occupation. The occupation will cease to exist, just as what before it ceased to exist, all the invaders were defeated. Palestine returned to be free and Arab. So Israel is today like Pharaoh, Hittite, Assyrians, and is another invader who will in the end disappear. This is the way kids grow up. This is children's education. We hear it from the adults, we hear it from the leaders, and we see the kids are growing up. In addition, all the Jews are going to leave. There's not going to be a Jew left. And how do we know this? This is, again, from this educational magazine. They look at Algeria as a model. Algeria was under French colonialism 132 years. At the end of the period of French colonialism, they all fled to France and left Algeria to the Arabs and the Algerians. Now here you see in red, they put this in red and bold so that no child would miss it in the magazine. Algeria's experience assures that the Jewish settlers in Palestine will disappear in the end. All the Jews are going to disappear, just like the French left Algeria. So this is the message. Again, the talk about the two-state solution is only for the people in Ottawa, people in Brussels, people in Washington. It's not for Palestinians. This is their message that they keep giving. I just like this one. This is during the Ukraine and Israeli wars together going on. He says, you Jews go to Ukraine and you go to the countries from which you came. Go to different places. Please return to your homeland and the problem will be solved. They want Jews from Israel to go to Ukraine. These are the kind of messages that comes along. Now, it's clear that the Palestinian Authority doesn't want to have peace with Israel. They don't tell their people they want peace without Israel. And one of the indicators of this is the incredible anger that the Palestinian Authority had when different Arab states in the Gulf made peace with Israel. And this is after the UAE and Bahrain had signed peace deals with Israel in recognition of Israel. So the Deputy Minister of Religious Affairs, these are the instructions he sent this out as instructions for the sermons. Remember I showed you yesterday they send out instructions, the sermons, everyone has to say the same words? Okay, so these are the instructions for the sermon right after those two states signed peace with Israel. And again, this is coming from the religious establishment, why it's so important. There's nothing that harms Palestine and its holy sites more than making alliance with Jews, being connected with them and relying on them. Normalization with the Zionist entity is high treason. Obedience to the Jews and being dragged after them will lead to humiliation and shame. We bring down the agreements of humiliation and treason by the UAE and Bahrain. These are treason. So again, because they have violated all of these religious norms and the holy sites, they're accepting Israel. So therefore it's considered treason. So you see, it's not that they're saying, okay, we want more, we still have to work for more peace. No, totally reject the peace that they made. Every person who wants peace should be thrilled that we have peace with more Arab countries. No, it's treason according to the Palestinian Authority. So let me just give a summary of what we said today. The summary regarding land. 1, Israel has no history. Palestinians have 5,000. You actually heard one time they said 10,000-year history. The land is Islamic land, and it's prohibited under Islam to accept Israel. It's not just the history that they're saying is theirs, but the land is Islamic, not just Palestinian, but it's Islamic. The Balfour Declaration was to get rid of the Jews and save Europe from the Jews who caused all the evil in the world. Jews never even prayed at the Western Wall. All of this. Balfour turned the Jewish religion into a fake nation. Therefore, Israel is a colonial implant with no right to exist. Israel, like all foreign invaders, will be destroyed. So this is the challenge that Israel faces today. The challenge is so hard because the international community doesn't hear this. And when they do hear it, they say, it doesn't mean anything. They're just saying that to their children. It's just a religious leader. I've heard it so many times. And they say, just take a chance, give them the land, see what'll happen. And of course, we tried that. We tried that in Gaza. We gave them the land and we left them all the economic infrastructure there, which they destroyed and turned into battlefields and put in tunnels of hundreds of kilometers of tunnels. And we know the end game of taking a chance with people who believe that they have the religious obligation to destroy us and kill us, every one of us. And you saw the polls yesterday. So that's why it's so challenging today, because we have a Western leadership who believes, okay, just forget everything that happened, forget what they believe, forget what they say, just sign with them, give them the land, you'll have peace. And of course, we know it's a fiction. And today there's really only one country that's firmly, maybe a few that are firmly standing behind Israel. And that's why it's so important that we and you also use our material, get this out to the world. In fact, I would say anyone who wants a copy of this presentation, write to me. Or any of the presentations I give, and I'll send it to you by email, put it online, and you'll be able to download. Thank you very much.